Lonesome Lance Podcast, Lonesome Report. I'm Jim Mundorf, Southwest Iowa, with Shad Sullivan.
The headwaters of Bitter Creek, Archer County, North Texas.
All right. We get together once a week, talk about what's going on in the world and in agriculture and in the history. Now we're talking history. Um, so we'll get into it, I guess. What's on everybody's mind is what went down last night, right?
Oof.
State of the Union.
Yes.
What'd you
Yeah.
think? Did you watch it?
I watched every stinking minute of it. I loved every minute of it. I thought it was I thought my first initial response was it's one of the greatest speeches in American history. Certainly one of the most informational and entertaining. But then by the time it was done, I was like, you know what? Trump may very well be the greatest president in American history because everything that he has promised to do, he has done, and he is streamlining. And he took no prisoners last night, man. I mean, I thought it was great. And I know I'm a constitutional conservative. I am a registered Republican in my small town, but I'm more of a constitutional conservative. I loved every minute of it, Jim.
You're part of the
Sorry,
fan club,
I am. And I
which
always
I loved
was.
it
I mean,
too,
I just
but
like,
yeah.
yeah.
I don't know if I'm gonna go all overboard like you, but and I didn't get to see the beginning of it because our high school here, the girls went to state basketball tournament, so I sat and watched that. And then I flipped over and he was already going, but all the fireworks had I missed the guy getting kicked out and the little
Oh,
paddles and all that
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Like it's like we got a junior high. It just reminded me of like, what is this? And how could they think that was a good idea? Well, even before it started, I guess if you watch MSM, if you haven't turned on the news or anything, or if you watch The View or MSNBC all day long, you probably didn't see there's 23 different senators had the exact same, practically word for word video
I did see that.
coming up before the speech, and they put them all together. And it's like, at first they found three. It was Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker, Chuck Schumer, I think. And they were word for word. And then they found all the
Yeah.
rest. Like it was just a speech, and it was word for word. Like they were talking about how prices are down, and they had the same, like they sat down at the same time. It was the whole same thing. So,
It was weird.
and it's like what I say too. Like people don't realize this information, this era we're living in, where all this stuff is getting shared. It's all getting compared at the speed of light. You just can't
Yep.
pull that crap anymore.
Yep.
But then also, like, how can you think those paddles are a good idea? They
Well,
look
I thought
so stupid and
they looked dumb.
juvenile. And
Well, I
I mean,
think that
even
it's a
if the
test.
Republicans did that during Biden, I would have been like,
Oh,
it's so embarrassed. Like I'm sure there's Democrats today that are just like, this is embarrassing.
100%, because it's a testament to how much decorum we have lost within our government, within those who represent the people. I mean, that is the people's house, the place of the utmost respect. Even if you disagree, there has to be a level of decorum that goes in there. And they lost it all last night. And the thing I noticed today the most was about everybody's talking on social media how disrespectful the left was to all of those people that he honored for losing their child or having cancer or being an American hero. I mean, the little boy that had cancer, CJ, I think was his name. Um, he just stole the show, right? And not one Democrat stood up for him and clapped. And I think it just showed the level of ungratefulness and bitterness that resides among the left. It was awful.
And it was like he set him up too. Like he's like, there's nothing before when he started, there's nothing I can do that can make you happy. And
And
then he
he's
had
right.
all these feel good stories, and it was like, look at these people. Which
Yeah.
it was brutal.
Did you see the spot where he said the Democrats thought we had to legislate the border protection? After all, or it turns out all we needed was a new president.
Yeah,
And
that
I
one's
mean,
getting
it was pretty good.
yeah, it was good. It was hard
Yeah.
not to be excited and cheering and every other thing. But you talk about decorum. What'd you think about him calling Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas?
I thought it was just typical Trump.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
know, but it
you're
was
not going to
almost
control
like
that guy.
I think that was quite a bit off script, and then you could almost see in his eye, like, well, maybe that was a little bit much.
Well, I was watching the vice president and the speaker of the house when he said that. And of course, the vice president just erupted in applaud. But the speaker of the house, he just kind of snickered a little. And then I thought he was probably thinking to himself, why did you say that? But it was
Yeah.
funny, even so.
Yeah. And I mean, like during Biden's, I can remember there was like Marjorie Taylor Greene and your girl Boebert. They were doing a little yapping too, but it wasn't
Yeah,
anything like I mean, they were yelling. He was talking about curing diseases and stuff, and they're like booing him,
I
when he was
know.
talking about Robert Kennedy. It was weird. It was weird
Well,
when you'd start hearing the booing.
That Al Green, he is a weird. He must be total commie or something because uh, he looks strange and he just everything the right does he is totally against, right? I
Yeah.
mean, just for being against it, that's all he is.
It's
And so
it is the one thing it is a little disappointing, even on both sides. It's like the late because have you seen the video? She's holding up a sign that says, I forget what it says, like this is not normal or something like that. Did you see that? And
no,
then Trump walks by, and then this Republican reaches over and grabs the piece of paper, crumples it up, and throws it right
no,
out of
I
her
didn't
hand.
see that.
And it's
I
like,
didn't
am I
see
looking
that.
at a junior high classroom here? It was just like it was just a shit show, kind of the whole, I don't know, yeah, it was just
Now
ridiculous.
I did see some opportunism in there because when he got done and he was walking out through the crowd, Lauren Boebert was on his right, and of course he shook her hand and did all that stuff that he has to do, and they're going down. Well, then all of a sudden he's almost to go out the door. Here's Lauren Boebert at the door taking a selfie with him, and I'm like, how did she crawl over all those chairs and run around that fast to be in that picture twice? But she dang sure did.
Well, she's a little booger.
She's tiny. She is tiny. Yeah, I thought it was great. I wonder, and I should have looked this up, but I wonder if during what did they call that? The double something
Call what?
speech to the House and Senate. I wonder if they've ever kicked an active legislator out before.
I would think. The thing with him was Kane, it's like it reminded me. Right before the Civil War, one guy beat another guy almost to death in the house with his
Oh,
cane. Yeah, a southern guy beat a northern guy to where he almost died. That reminded me that guy's holding
dang.
that cane up and waving it around.
Yeah,
I didn't know who that guy.
yeah.
Where's he from? That Green.
I can't remember. Al Green is his name.
I'd never even heard of him before. Um,
He's the one that he filed both impeachment articles against Trump
oh,
last time. Oh, he's from
somebody.
Texas. Yeah, he's from Texas.
How did you
Wow.
not know that?
I knew of him, but I wasn't sure where he was
He's got
from.
to be from Houston, don't he?
I am not going to say.
Which that I think that little kid was from Houston,
Yeah,
DJ or CJ, whatever it was.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. He's
Texas.
a DJ.
Um, I guess back to our wheelhouse. What'd you think about the farmers? They're gonna have, are we having fun?
Boy, they're
I
sure.
guess the cattle business is having fun, but the
Yeah,
corn people, the grain people might not be having fun. That goes back
yeah.
to his tweet yesterday or whatever, his thing. We're gonna have so much fun. It said, farmers are gonna have fun. We're gonna make so much money. Have fun.
Well, remember what I said. We're going to go through a rough spot. Well, that's
Yep.
exactly what he said twice last night. He says it's going to be a little rough for a minute. Just trust in the process. That's what I say. Trust in the process. Yeah, I don't know. They're all crying the blues. I guess they want their money, and they're going to get the money because Brooke Rollins did at the Commodity Classic in Denver did tell them that they were going to. She was going to go ahead and release 10 billion in funds
That's today.
for. This was 2 days ago that they were going to release that. It's a $30 billion They have $30 billion they're going to release to the farmers. 10 billion of it they're going to start releasing immediately, and that is to go to like with this. Remember, Skyler back in Missouri was worried about he wasn't going to get his EQIP money. This is all going to be EQIP and conservation programs. Some of these that have long-term contracts on
So
them,
that's not new
and so
stuff. That's
she
just
she is going to.
honoring, right?
Well, it was froze. It was funds that he froze, and
Yeah,
then
but he's
of
just
course it's
honoring
part of that
contracts.
$30 billion. That's right. Really,
Yeah.
he's just honoring uh, contracts, but they're calling it the Commodity Assistance Program, and then they're going to be on track for this ECAP, um, which is the Emergency Commodity Assistance Program. Uh, 90 days. They have 90 days to start distributing it. Um, Starts on March 20th, and then they have to distribute it all within 90 days.
What's the
Um,
emergency? The tariffs?
I think it's just low commodity prices from 2023 and 24, and starting on 25. They are working on the 20. It's 20 billion, I think. Let me look real quick. I've got it right here.
I would
Yeah,
think 20 million don't go
it's
anywhere.
it's 20 billion B with a B in disaster. Um, so yeah, that surely had to make them feel a little bit better. At least those guys with contracts that had their money frozen. So that's starting out.
So what do you think of tariffs?
What do I think of tariffs?
Hmm.
I am all for tariffs. I've said it before. Let's do it. Let's get it on. Um, you know, I'm not a financial expert. I'm not an economic expert. I'm one of those guys that likes to buy low and sell high. That's how that's how I was taught to make money. But I think that tariffs. I think that America has been the dumping ground for so many countries for so long. I am all for it. I am all for the change. I'm sitting here going, what we've been doing is not working. Trump has a new vision. Let's follow it. Let's try it. Let's trust the process and tariff the hell out of them. That's what I say.
Well, I mean, at
Is
least
that,
like what he said definitely made a lot of sense where he's like, we should at least be charging what they're charging. How come we're getting charged so much to send our stuff there and and we're charging them less to send it? Just doesn't make any sense. And we've almost become the way. And the other thing is, like, I don't want to turn into the where like think most shows are, where they're like, "Oh, let me tell you my expert opinion on tariffs." Like, I don't think there's very many people that actually understand how it works, or even what he's like. What you said is um, he said, stick with me, and it'll be worth it. Meaning, this is probably a negotiating type of thing to get them to lower their
yes.
tariffs, and then maybe we'll lower our tariffs, and then maybe who knows, in a month or two or a week or two, maybe things will be right back where they were. Only we're either making more money or not losing as much money when we're sending stuff overseas. I just don't
Well,
think
and
people understand it. What are we, 2 days in
yeah, we're 2 days in, but you're right.
from
No,
the announcement? Yeah.
people don't understand tariffs, but it's more of a to me it's more of a negotiating tool because
Right.
when he threatened tariffs, the first thing Mexico did was arrest 29 gang members
Yeah.
and send troops to the border, right?
Right.
And then you talk about he's just I guess it's the art of the deal, right? He's such a deal maker. I mean, in his speech last night, he has this letter after the debacle in the White House this week with Zelensky. Now he has a letter. Zelensky wants to come back and be a good boy,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And oh my God, Democrats just went crazy over that. And a lot of my Republican friends did, and I was like, heck yeah, we kicked his butt. That's the way it should have been. I mean, he's disrespectful to our nation and has been for years, and we've been propping him up. But the tariff deal is a negotiating tool. But I am all for I am all for bringing all of this creation and productivity back to the United States. I think that we need to serve our own country again and make that priority.
Yeah, and his negotiating thing too, like That's what he does. He's a negotiator, and
Yes.
his whole thing was like, just hang with me. That's saying, there's a plan here, and I can't show my hand. That's part of negotiating. He's not going to come out here and be
Exactly.
like, okay, this is what I'm trying to do, because then everybody knows, like all of the, you know, Canada, Mexico, everybody we're dealing with, knows what he's going to do.
I'm sure we've already made. I'm sure he had a lot of deals with these countries that are complaining about tariffs before last night, and he didn't even talk about them. I'm
Yeah.
sure there's deals already done, and of course, it's like I saw somebody today talking about they're worried about these tariffs, the Canadian tariffs, and somebody else chimed in and said they're not the only people we sell our products to. I
Right.
mean, we can sell our products all over the world.
Well, we
Canada
can
and
sell more here
Mexico,
too.
China, they're not people, and we can sell more here too. And until we're not a net importer of food, I think it's a good idea to follow follow what's going on. That's what I think.
Yep. And you said you kind of hinted at like what we've been doing. If we continue the way we've been doing everything, we're just maintaining the status quo. And what we're going to continue to bang on here
Absolutely.
is the status quo is we've lost 140,000 farms and ranches in the last 5 years, right? 107,000 beef,
That,
small beef producers in the last 5 years. And so, but then if you look at going over the past week and even today, Brett sent us this video. There was a hearing, I think it was this morning. They have these Senate hearings and they brought in, today it was Turkey Federation, um, sheep association, egg association, and NCBA got their guy in. Oh, Montana Farmers Union was in there, but then NCBA was in there too. And then we had that hearing right before the last show, which we got that wrong. That wasn't in front of Brooke Rollins, which we said it was, but that was just Senate
no,
Ag
that was
Committee. Yeah.
right. Right.
Um, And so, but it's just the same players over and over. And like Farm Bureau has come out and is against against Trump's tariff plan because they just want to maintain the status
Yep.
quo. It's like, let's keep this,
Well, yeah,
going
their
as it
jobs
is.
depend on it.
Right. Because if we have a couple of down days in the market, everybody freaks out, which, yeah. I mean, I get the freaking out but I mean, you just can't, if you want to have people in rural America. And Jack Payne had a great post this week about how his hometown has went from, 8-man football to 6-man football to no team pretty much. And you see that everywhere. Like, I mean, he's in Nevada, 20-hour drive away from me, and we have the exact same thing here. My hometown has went to 8-man football in the
Exactly.
last few
Yep.
years, and there's tons of small towns that don't have enough kids for teams, and they're all combining now. We know
Yep.
there's like one team just has a couple softball players and they got to send them down the road to play on another team. It's just rural America is just shriveling up,
Jim,
and
that's
that's been the
exactly the
story for
way.
our lifetime.
That's well, I can remember actually when I was a young kid, before McDonald's and Walmart came in 50 miles away, we had a very robust Main Street in Ordway, Colorado, and we even had a newspaper on Main Street that was very very active. But today, we are. You just said it. Our softball, they have to go to another town to play. The girls' basketball team has 6 or 8 kids on it. Our churches are going downhill. We're playing other teams that they are separate in schools, but they team up to 2 schools make one team, and it's truly a it's the result or the fruit of what we're talking about. It's the same old. And if we don't change something, it's just going to get worse and worse. And I'm just beating that drum. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but the truth is the broken system is the broken system, and we are not going to fix anything till there's different action. Right? We got to get rid of the talk and start having different action. And I think that's really what this new administration brings to the table. But there is a problem in. I don't know if it's a problem, but there is I think that the transition, especially in USDA, is very slow. And so that's why we see all of this partnering with the same old global corporations, I think, and the trade organizations and the same legislators. And you know, I think it's something that we are going to have to work on really pretty quick. But I think I do know this: it's slow. The transition in the USDA is very slow right now. I've got confirmation of that.
Yeah. Speaking of slow, we had a video glitch there. Your audio came through fine through all that, but you were like stopped for a while. So
Oh,
apologies to
well,
everyone watching.
that did that did that to you a while ago
Yeah, well,
on my.
I told Shad I'm snowed in, and I mean we are snowed in. We can't leave. We can't get down the road right now. So that's where we are today. And the internet comes through satellite. It kind of affects things at times. So
So you didn't get to go to the state championship basketball game.
no, it was just state tournament, but it was the first round. Congrats to Trainer
Okay.
High School but they lost their. But yeah, pretty much everybody that was going to the game had a hotel book before they left because it was it
Yeah.
was it got a little nasty last night. Um, but to go back to like the status quo and watching these hearings, which I just fast forward to the one good thing that came out of the one today was the first thing the NCBA got, which is National Cattlemen's Beef Association. First thing he talked about was he wanted them senators to support the checkoff, which means that they're hearing from people like you and me. And what he said was that that anyone who talks about the checkoff, bad about the checkoff, is a small minority of voices who have been amplified by radical animal rights industrial complex. That's
Yeah.
us, buddy. We're being amplified by the animal rights industrial complex. And that's what he wants the senators to know. But there's the problem. All of these meetings, those two hearings both have had a representative from the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. And the reason that
Yep.
they are so powerful is because of that checkoff. So the number
Yep.
one thing on their priority list is to protect that checkoff.
Yep.
Um,
And attack the small guy that is not benefiting from it. And yeah, I know. If they only knew how many times I've been attacked by animal rights ideologues, they die. And now they're saying we're
you are
partnered
one.
with them. Yeah, it's so ridiculous. They're just. I mean, and how much productivity on the land are they involved in? That's what I want to know.
Yeah. Yeah. But it comes back to also because, it makes you think when you see these things and they're almost, you know, impossible to listen to and pay attention because it's all such a bunch of fluff and BS. But when the guy introduces himself, he says, "We are the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. We are the voice of the cattlemen," and he makes it out to, he's there to
Yeah.
represent everyone in the cattle industry, which it makes you think too. Like you go back to that Farm Bureau article where it's like we are against Trump's plan when everyone voted. We kind of knew this was going to happen if you were paying attention. Um, and I'm sure there's guys that voted for him that didn't know exactly how this was going to go down, or in a couple weeks they might be his biggest fan too. You never know. But I always think about when with these big organizations, it's like who represents who. You know what I mean? Because you get these cattle guys that go along with NCBA on this EID. We see different things like that. But the reason they do that is because they go to these big meetings, they get their asses kissed, and they're like, they go to the DC fly-in, all that kind of stuff, and they get told what a big wheel they are. And then they're like, this is our policy, and this is why it would work, and this is how it should work, and all that. But to go back to policy, go back to EID, which is electronic identification ear tags, that really showed how the system works. They came up with their policy that they wanted to institute, that the USDA paid them $668,000. That's another thing to go back to Doge. When you look at NCBA through usspending.gov, or you look at NCBA, they didn't receive any money for, I think, like the last 10 years, except for 2023. and they received $668,000 that year from the USDA. And that was the exact same year that the USDA came out with their EID rule. And the next January, NCBA had in their policy that they wanted all animals to wear electronic identification ear tags and all producers to be forced to put electronic identification ear tags in their ears. And the only reason that policy got stopped is because people heard about it. Like if it wasn't for people talking about it, they would have took that into that meeting, just like you said last week when the guy walked out of the meeting and was like, "What did we vote on?" You know, like they take
Yep.
these their policy, they take it to their convention to with all the people who are their bootlickers, and they vote on their policy that they've been told how to vote on, and then it comes out, and then they go to DC and they say, "We are the voice of the American cattle producer." You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's like
That's
they
right.
are,
And
and
legislators
so they get cattle producers to represent them as much as cattle producers get them to represent. And you can say the same thing with Farm Bureau. If you look through their policy book, I guarantee you a ton of that stuff would not pass if they laid it out in front of the majority of their members.
absolutely. And you can see that on the local level when they pass policy on the local level and then take it to the state and national, and they don't even let them present it. And
Right.
that's a fact, man. And but see what happens there, Jim, is when they take this policy into the front of the legislators, the majority of the legislators have no ag background at all. They have no
Yep.
idea about finance. They're most of them are lawyers, right? They're not even good CPAs or business people, and a lot of them have been in Congress for years and years and years. And you know as well as I do, if you're not in the thick of it, doing it, you don't have the experience or knowledge to understand it. And so they have to go by their word and say, we are representing the grassroots cattlemen. Well, what else choice do they have? They have to lean on them, right? They don't know the
Hmm.
truth. That's why it's so important for like people like Massey and Hageman and all of these grassroots, really truthfully grassroots legislators, to help us inform the rest of the legislative body, because if we don't, that pay to play game wins. And we've seen that in the policy. And that's why we're living in the times we are.
And that goes back to maintaining the status quo. We have the same people in
Absolutely.
DC given these, speaking of these hearings that we've had for the past 5, 10, whatever, how many years. And what you
Yep.
posted this morning, 700,000 small farms and ranches have
Yep.
been lost. What was that, since the 80s? Did you have a
It's in
ton?
the last 40 years.
40
Yeah.
years. Yeah.
In the last 40 years.
Yeah.
And, and it also goes to show, you know, it's an example of maybe the transition in these agencies, because nothing has really changed at USDA. They still have producers complaining about the same things. So then, if they don't, when they don't clean the house in the transitions, you have the same holdovers. They have the same experience and knowledge of the issues that they were brought to by the previous administration or even the previous administration. And so nothing gets changed. There's really no rule changes. It's the same way everywhere you look, legislation or in the agencies or wherever it is. The truth of the matter is Trump's America First policy is the first true change we've had the opportunity to be a part of in the last how many presidents? For sure, five.
Yeah.
Four.
Like our lifetimes, really.
Yeah,
Um,
probably our lifetime.
as far as USDA. Um,
Oh, absolutely.
and you said USDA is real slow, but that's almost compared to, which we've talked in the past episodes about the Doge team firing all these people and different stuff. Like that's compared to like lightning speed too. But people are a little bit losing
Well, it's
patience
compared
because,
to AI.
yeah, because, as far as Brooke Rollins, what did I call it last time? Brooke Rollins update, the Secretary of Agriculture. She just kind of going around and being the CEO, right? Like she's just putting a good face on this program, but not really talking that much about policy. She's mainly focusing on the bird flu. We haven't heard that much else, but she's putting the miles on, that's for sure. It's like every other day she's at a
Boy, she
different
She really is, and I'm wondering how they get her, um, how they get her attention to get her to a conference. Like, how do you get her to a conference to speak in
Yeah,
front of people? Nobody even knows how to get a hold of her.
right. And if it was me, like if I had anything to say, I'd be like, I would way rather you be in DC looking at how this whole system needs to be fixed than at some farm show.
Well, that's me too.
But
I'm sure there's
maybe
plenty.
she's like, I'm gonna be the CEO head figure and travel around and put a face on this thing while my people are back, you know, putting the putting the boots on the ground, I guess, as far as getting things
Her
fixed.
team.
Yeah. But then
Yeah,
you
her
also
team.
look
That's
at,
what she calls it. Her team.
yeah, you also look at how the other things have went with some of these firings and stuff, and now they're hiring a few people back, and it's almost like maybe that was a little too quick. You don't think so?
Yeah, I don't know.
You know,
I don't know. I don't know because I don't know who. I don't know if they really have fired all of those people that they've fired. I don't know who they've hired. I don't
yeah,
know
they've hired people back. I know
anything.
that.
Have they?
But what we talked about too, like instead of just going through and cutting people without even knowing who they were, like let's start with the guy that's arrested the Mod family. You know what I mean? Like that guy's not fired because he wasn't on probationary period. Like let's get into these, send people out into these systems and figure out who we don't need, who actually is a complete and total waste, and who might actually be a BLM guy who's on the side of the ranchers who wants to work with the ranchers instead of
Exactly.
telling them how to do things. And I feel like you're more likely the old school people are the ones who just want to go out there and tell them what they should do and have to do. And the new people, you maybe have a chance of getting them to actually work with people. I don't know. It's just my 2 cents.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with you there. Uh, looking his name up, there's nothing because like
Yeah.
Travis still has a job, but I do know that they have transferred him out of South Dakota.
But to go back to, I mean, the USDA is in charge of the checkoff. So this guy going to these senators hopefully has nothing to do with if checkoff actually gets reformed or not.
Yeah.
But I mean, how do we? I mean, it'll be interesting, I guess, to see if these guys, how much influence these organizations really have in DC, since we are going through this major change of, I mean, Farm Bureau came out against Trump's tariff policies, and Trump's moving full steam ahead on his tariff policy. So it seems like he is, pretty much ignoring that advice. And I mean, that's my
Yeah.
hope that he just does
Yeah.
ignore
That
these
to me,
associations.
you bet. To me,
And
that's a good sign. It's a
right.
really good sign. And he did address her last night, not by name, but Secretary, you got some work ahead of you. So maybe like you said, maybe he understands more than we know.
What did you think of her get up?
Well, I was wondering if
Fashion update.
yeah, the fashion update. I don't know. Was that a jacket over her or a cape or something?
I'm not
I
sure.
don't I don't
It's like her
know. I mean,
sleeves were shooting out, her arms were shooting out of something.
she
But we're
looked
not
like
exactly the fashion police, so
yeah.
it was
I'm
just a
not.
little interesting compared to the rest of
Well, I'm not certainly not an expert in fashion, and I thought she looked fine and appropriate. It didn't bother me a bit, and I thought they all did. The only thing I kind of wondered was why wasn't Cash Patel sitting down there among them? He was up in the balcony.
them. I don't know.
Did you find that weird?
I didn't even think about it, but now that you say that, yeah, the whole cabinet was in right in front of him except for
Yeah,
him. And he even said
exactly.
it. He goes, his cat, I don't know where Cash is. Didn't he say that
Yeah,
during the speech?
yeah. He says, "Where's Cash?"
Yeah, that was weird.
And I thought, well, that was weird. Maybe him and Pam aren't getting along or something. I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, but I mean that group, that cabinet group, they seem like very cohesive. I mean,
Oh, yeah,
they're taking pictures together and they're like dream team, all that kind of stuff.
that's
It's
kind
kind of
of
cool to
what
see.
it really is. And
Yeah.
what's cool about it is we kind of know them. They've been in the news so much.
Yeah.
We kind of know who they
Well,
are.
I feel like we followed it so close this time around
Yeah,
because we feel like there's an
yeah,
actual point, I think this time, you know? To whereas before it's like,
Exactly.
we got a different attorney general who's going to do the exact same stuff as the last one.
Exactly.
Is that what it was? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't
One
know
thing I
either.
wanted to say, um, weekly Brett Kenzie shout out. I think
Okay.
he said this week. This is what I was thinking when I heard that guy, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, talk about he's the voice of the grassroots guy or whatever. But like, oh, the other shout out, RCAP. We've never congratulated Dave Hyde, new RCAP president, and Eric Groper,
Yeah.
vice president. I'm
Yeah.
sure Eric is going to make all kinds of waves. I can't wait to hear his speech at the convention this year.
Well, he sent me an article to go over last night, and I'm gonna have to do a little bit of editing on it for him. But I think, Eric's one of the he doesn't want you to know this, but he's super smart, and he has a very very good grasp of issues, and he has experience working in other places besides on the ranch. Like I think he worked for USDA at one time,
Yeah,
and he is super super smart and knowledgeable. And then Dave Hyde is one of the most intriguing people I know because he really gets down and he knows how to follow those rabbit holes and research very very well. And then he has a total grasp. He was in electricity, I think, in his lifetime, and
I could see that.
he just has a very good understanding of corporate America.
Right.
So yeah, they're going to be both. They're both going to be great.
But with NCBA saying we're the voice of the grassroots cattlemen, when you know they're getting flown up there and staying in a fancy hotel, they've got the fancy office, all that stuff on NCBA's dime, and where Brett Kinsey, I'm pretty sure he said 5,000 miles he's traveled in the last couple months on his own dime, pays for everything himself. He's out there doing it because he cares about the industry. Where in these big groups, the farm bureaus and the NCBAs, they do it because it's a cool thing to do. You know what I
Absolutely.
mean? Like,
They all
uh,
get reimbursed
yeah,
too.
I mean, yeah.
I
And
mean,
it's
I
you
just
get it's like free vacations. It's like being on the beef board. They get
no,
two
it
free
is.
vacations every year.
Somebody asked me yesterday. I've probably got Brett beat as far as I mean, in the last 3 or 4 years, I've probably traveled close to 50,000 miles for free to go speak places. I just traveled 1,000 miles the last 2 days. And somebody down there asked me, do you ever charge? And I'm like, no, I don't ever charge. I feel really bad about charging. And my whole deal is that I'm not against charging. It always goes back to me to the soldiers who died, right? And for their country. And this is my way of kind of paying my country back. And Brett's the same way, but we do it. Both of us sat on the RCAF board, which is why we do it. They have a cause we believe in, and Brett's another one of them guys that's so dang smart. He's just way above me. But yeah,
Just to
I,
clarify, you're not comparing yourself to a soldier who died.
no, I'm saying they all did it for free.
Right.
They
Yeah.
all
Well,
did it
they
for
got
free.
paid, but I'm just saying like
I'm
it
just saying
it gives you
they,
motivation to go do it for
that's
free when you think
exactly what I'm
about.
saying.
I just want to
That
make sure nobody's
yeah.
like, "Oh, this guy he's driving around giving talks. He thinks he's a soldier dying in
No,
war."
no, no. I do it because I respect what they've done for us so much.
Yeah. Right on, man. Well, speaking of deaths, moving on to the bird flu, which I have never wanted to talk about because I don't see it as, I guess, to be on it. I can't remember what we talked about last week because, full disclosure, we recorded two of these last week because I screwed up and that's why it came out late also. But it didn't get recorded right the first time. And that's the first time I've ever had to do that. I'm glad it was with Shad. But I can't remember what we talked about. But the one thing I said is I don't really give a shit about bird or about egg prices. You know what I mean? Because what that comes down to is the system of why we are in this place where we are. And you know, I hate to see barns full of chickens euthanized and turkeys and all this kind of stuff. But, if you got and the Democrats just keep pounding this egg price thing. Hope you're happy with your egg prices. I see that kind of crap all around. It's like $5 extra for a carton of eggs. Like we can deal with it. And I eat a ton of eggs. But the bird flu deal, I've made some calls and tried to figure out actually what's going on. I guess the first thing I put a post about there was this week a press release came out from a pharmacy company, pharmaceutical veterinary
Edema.
pharmaceutical company. No, it was called Megden
Med
MedGen.
Gene.
Yeah, I didn't have it in front of me.
Yeah.
Who says they're on the verge of they're in the final stages of having a vaccine for gosh, I got to think about the words I'm saying now because we got banned because we got booted, but
H H5N1
right
vaccine for cattle.
for cattle.
Right.
Um, and
Specifically
so
dairy cattle.
yeah, for dairy cattle, which it didn't say anything, but people saw that headline and they were like, "I'll be damned if I'm going to put that in my cattle," which I get it. That's the right response. But if you read the article, it didn't say anything about requiring anybody to do anything. All it said was they're trying to get an emergency. Uh, there's a certain way that they put it, and I can't remember what they call it, but a conditional approval for this vaccine for dairy cattle.
Okay.
Um,
Well, it has met, this vaccine has met all requirements from the USDA on their, as far as their, for what you're saying, a conditional review on USDA's uh, technology platform is what they call it, and it has met all that. So all they have to do is sign the papers and distribution agreement, and it's ready to go. And I think they're partnering with Elanco on this MedGene or
how do you
MedGen.
know they passed all the stuff? What's that from?
Um, this is from an article today, actually
Oh,
out
okay.
today. The vaccine, it says MedGene said its H5N1 vaccine for dairy cattle has met all USDA requirements for platform technology guidelines and is in the final stages of review for conditional license approval.
Okay. And who put that out?
Who did put this
Because
out?
what came out earlier was a press release. It was kind of
Farm,
summing up,
that came from Farm Progress today.
yeah, which probably comes from the MedGene people, which I got
It
into,
definitely came from the MedGene people.
yeah, which if you follow, like I got after like the housing crisis in 2008, 2009, I was watching CNBC all the time, trying to figure out like how the economy works. And they
Mhm.
always have these CEOs on, and they just do everything they can right up to the edge of just blatant lying to brag about their company and to get people interested in their company. And
Sure.
like their goal is to put a face on the company and get people to invest in it, especially if they're going on CNBC. And so I always, when I ever hear a CEO come on and put out, in a press release or talk about their company, it's kind of like, okay. And some of them went all the way with into
But they
lying.
have,
Some of them would just
but
blatantly lie.
they have signed a distribution agreement with Elanco.
Hmm.
And
But we
I
don't.
will go back to say this earlier. Another pharmaceutical company, Zoetis, I think, has already had this vaccine out, and they actually have um, a contract, I think, with USDA, uh, but it hasn't been used yet. So
Right.
I don't think this is anything new.
So we don't know
But
where we're at.
yeah, we really don't know where we're at on that. But I do want to address this one thing about the avian bird flu. Uh, at Brooke Rollins, Secretary Rollins did roll out, this robust 5-star approach or 5-pronged approach to address the avian bird flu. And the first prong of that was to invest in gold standard biosecurity measures for all U.S. producers. And that, means biosecurity from wildlife, free testing, trained epidemiologists going out to help these producers. The USDA is going to pay for 75% of it. The second one is to increase relief to aid farmers in acceleration of repopulation after depopulation. That's up to $400 million. The third one is to remove unnecessary regulatory burdens on the chicken and egg industry to further innovate and reduce consumer prices. They're going to import a whole bunch of eggs. The fourth one is to explore pathways to vaccines and therapeutics strategies and other strategies for protecting egg-laying chickens to reduce the instances of depopulation. That $100 million for that. And then on the last one, they want to consider temporary import-export options to reduce costs on consumers and evaluate international best practices. That's the 20 million pounds of eggs going to be imported. So, I guess they're working on the avian bird flu in at USDA, and that's a big deal, right?
Yeah. So I talked to somebody who knows a few things. One thing
Okay.
was weird. One of the questions I had was, how come it's just dairy cattle and it hasn't been seen in beef, which it hasn't been seen in beef. I'm 99% sure. She said it really comes from mammary tissue. It like settles into the mammary tissue. It has something to do with more, it's dairy cows. It's not like you're seeing it in these dairy herds. It's like a few select dairy cows. And I believe the dairy cows, I guess I can't say 100%, but I'm pretty sure the vast majority of dairy cows that have been like tested positive can be traced to this outfit in Texas somehow or another. That's what I was told. I don't know. But it is weird. And the other thing is Joel Salatin's going all around saying we shouldn't be euthanizing all these birds because we should just see which ones survive and keep those. Right? Have you heard him say that?
Yeah, yeah, he's saying that, and from what I am understanding, in the bird flocks, I want to call them bird herds, but in the bird flocks themselves, the death loss is at less as at 10%, 12 to 10 to 12% or less on this disease.
Yeah.
On the cattle, if the cattle get the disease, the way I'm understanding it, and I've talked to a few dairy farmers, is that they present with a little bit of a fever, a lot of reduction in milk production. It doesn't kill them, and then but they that lower milk production kind of lasts for a while, but then they'll come back up. That's the way
Yeah.
I understood them to
That's what I
say. So
heard. They don't eat. First sign is they're not eating, which obviously goes if they're not eating, they're not going to produce milk. And I heard about 2 weeks, I think, is all, and then they're right back to it. So
that's right. That's
low
what I.
mortality, like there's very really small threat of,
So
it's
how
not like the chicken deal.
so how is the avian bird flu affecting dairies? Let's say out in the middle of eastern New Mexico or far west Texas. How are they getting them? Because those are always, to me, those are always closed herds. Is it the
The birds
blackbirds that
or
are
the
always,
dairy?
yeah, no, the dairies. How are
Well,
those
that's the
cattle getting?
question.
Okay, so
If I'm
let me
constantly,
just since we're gonna
I'm
get
always thinking of ways to not. I mean, that goes into there's a deeper conversation to have here, but what can we even say about it? Because when you say
well, let me
certain
just say
words that
this.
go back to a certain thing that happened 5 years ago, you just can't talk about it.
Right.
So,
Or they kick you off. So I I spoke to a political group yesterday down in the Gulf of America, in the Gulf of America,
yeah, right on.
down the Calhoun County, the Calhoun County Republicans at Port Lavaca, Texas. A great group of people. As with all groups, most of them are getting older, and there was probably 50, 60 people there. There was, from what I understood, of the people I met, there was about two producers, but they didn't make their living with cattle that were there. So they were kind of a uh, far away from the agriculture that me and you know. They were more fish and shrimp, shrimpers, and seafood people. Like there was some of those producers there. Anyway, so I did my war on beef presentation, got through it, and they all loved it very much. And but the only question they had is is the USDA really going to put H5N1 vaccines in cattle? That was the only question I got from the
Yeah.
audience. And so they were separated from agriculture, but they had seen the headlines on that, which I thought was just crazy that and they were worried about that. And so I thought that was really odd coming out of there when they were down on the Gulf Coast, and most of them are not connected to agriculture, but they were very very well versed in food priority, right? And so that was kind of good to see. But I thought, like I said, I thought that was very strange that that was their priority question for the night, and I had not said anything about that. They just brought it up, so it's a
Yeah.
concern apparently.
Yeah. And to go back to the egg thing, one of the questions, so to go back to Joel Salatin, his thing about, just keep them, just let it work its way through the herd. From the person I talked to, when it gets into these barns, because they are these closed barns, it kills all of them. And maybe there could be the way she talks, she didn't give these numbers, but 5 or 10% that live. But then
Mhm.
you still have 5 or 10% who've been exposed. So like if you have, to make it easy, let's say how many birds are in these barns? Thousands? So if like you have
Yeah.
1,000 birds in a barn and 50 of them live, you know, and then you got to bring in 9,000 or 950 more that next to these birds who've already been exposed. I mean, it just isn't going to work. So you have to euthanize the whole barn, actually the whole facility, because they have said they've tried. A lot of these chicken barns are, 5 or 8 barns in a row, when you see them, and they've tried to just do one barn and keep it out of the other barns, and that never works, apparently.
Yeah,
So
but you're
now,
talking. What you're saying is you're talking about corporate, vertically integrated poultry production. Joel Salatin is talking about independent
well,
reproduction.
he's talking about his operation, but I'm thinking what I've heard him say is we shouldn't be euthanizing all of these birds.
Yeah, I heard him
Right.
say that too.
Right. And to me, it's like, well, because of the system we've created that you just described, you have to, right?
Well,
I
not you
mean,
don't
it
have
doesn't make any sense not
if you're going to
to
lose
in that
95%
system.
of them, you don't have to euthanize them. They're already dead.
Yeah, but they said the reason that they're euthanizing them is because they're going to die anyway, and it's actually a worse death to die from the disease than being euthanized.
How do
Does that
you
make sense?
euthanize? Well, how do you euthanize chickens like
You
that?
didn't see the video. There's a video that's getting passed all around of they foam them. They put this, I don't know what they put in it, but it's foam that goes over them all, and they're
Okay.
dead. They die right away. They said they
Wow.
do the same thing with pigs. So it's a barn of turkeys. The video that's going out is this barn of turkeys. And
Interesting.
it does suck to watch because it's all these turkeys, their heads up, seeming healthy, but the way this disease works, I mean, I heard within like 2 days they would all be dead. Um, there's people who've had them had the disease come into like a small flock on their place, and within like 2 days they're all dead.
You're
But we're
talking about if they don't euthanize them and the bird and
Yeah, bird flu will
the
go through within like a day or
situ
two.
the 2 day deal. Okay.
Yeah, that's how it was explained to me. So
Interesting.
yeah, it was interesting. But as far as
Yeah, I don't
people,
know.
um, it's not really a threat. Symptoms were pink eye, I think. I don't know. It seems like a whole lot of.
Yeah.
I mean, it's another. I mean, disease. It's an issue, definitely for sure. But you know, it's constant. It's just something we have to deal with. Goes back to I just looked this up.
Well,
During COVID, the Tyson CEO put out a full page ad in the New York Times, a delicate balance feeding the nation and keeping our employees healthy. And he talks about kind of One of the lines was um, closing of processing facilities that could have fed the nation. He said, "We have a responsibility to feed our country. It is essential as healthcare. This is a challenge that should not be ignored." Um, which I agree with. But if we're going to continue to concentrate agriculture into these concentrated facilities, like we need to learn from what's going on now and what went on during COVID, that is, you know, not a system that that works when these kind of things happen. Um,
Nope,
right?
it
And
does not work.
you have the NCBA who wants to, they're telling us foot and mouth diseases on our doorstep constantly. And then they're also putting this guy who's putting up 150,000 head feedlot in Nebraska, they put him in the Hall of Fame or whatever they put him, they and they celebrate this feedlot that's a gigantic concentrated, to use their term, the CAFO, concentrated animal feeding operation.
Yep,
But it's concentrated animals in one area, and when diseases come in, you know, it goes through them all. And
that's
because,
right.
so it's the system that needs fixed.
Correct. It's the war on
My
beef,
two
buddy.
cents. Yeah, exactly.
It is.
All right, man.
Okay, okay. We have more. Hey,
Yeah.
let's talk real quick about the Corporate Transparency Act so people
Oh,
know.
I said that
You
was our
know,
last. I said your video. So I said that was our last update. I guess we could go ahead.
we need to update the people. Get the
Yeah.
Corporate Transparency Act out of your head. Don't worry about it. It doesn't pertain to you. It only pertains to foreign businesses. Trump said it was absolutely a quagmire of bullcrap, and they're not enforcing it. They're not going to enforce the rule. They're not going to implement fines or penalties, and you guys can forget about it. Go do business like Americans should. Okay,
Right
that's
on.
my update on the Corporate Transparency Act.
And if you're not
Okay,
following
what else?
Shad or Lonesome Lands on Facebook, you wouldn't have seen that. So you're right. We should have. And if not, follow on our social media.
Yep, follow Lonesome Lands, subscribe to Lonesome Lands because we've got a lot of good information we're bringing to you once a week.
Right on. Anything else?
News wise, I mean, I think we've covered what's pretty good and thoughtful this week. Of course, there's lots of stuff in the news. I just got a text a while ago saying that USDA or Trump has kind of been forced to rehire a bunch of USDA employees that were fired. And so we'll see where that goes.
What were they doing?
I think they were those employees that were there for less than a year,
Yeah, but what was their job? Why do you have to rehire them? Because a lot of times, I think there was bird flu people who were in the middle of working with that issue that got fired, and then they brought some back.
Yeah,
Did it say what
that's
those
a different
people?
issue.
But did it say what those people were doing?
I think they've just been they were employed all across the nation.
Oh, okay. All right. Lonesome history update. You said you wanted to talk about Oliver Loving. What were you going to say about that?
Hold on,
Oh
I'm
boy,
bringing this up to you right now.
I was getting excited for something fun to talk
USDA,
about.
hold on, USDA ordered to reinstate nearly 6,000 fired probationary workers. There you go.
Who
That's 20
ordered it?
minutes ago. Looks like says the U.S. Department of Agriculture must reinstate 5,900 fired employees for at least 45 days per an order issued Wednesday by the Merit Systems Protection Board, an agency that handles federal worker complaints.
Hmm. Sounds like a union outfit.
It is, and it says these fires. They are saying these firings were likely unlawful, is what this board ruled. And probationary workers can only be terminated if their performance or conduct demonstrates that they're unfit for the job. All
Hmm.
right. Okay. Yeah. So what are we going to talk about? Lonesome history.
You said you want to talk about Oliver Loving.
Well, do you want to talk about somebody different?
I had some other different stuff, but what'd you have for Oliver Lovey?
Okay, do it. No, let's do
Well,
yours.
well,
Come
I
on
was
now.
going to expand on this corporate control of agriculture and cattle industry because
For
I was
history?
talking to you know what's interesting? I was talking to Jack and we were going back
Yes,
about
sir.
Chekhov and different stuff. And he's like, it's like them. And
Hmm.
I was thinking the exact same thing earlier. He's like, it's just like the movies, like how he said open range, which have you ever seen? You haven't seen many movies. Someday we should do
I've seen Open Range a million.
a million times with Kevin Costner and Robert Duvall.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yes,
Little
I love
side
that show.
note. So I kind of strayed away from agriculture and stuff during college. I was into some other things. And then like my senior year of college, I went to that movie, took my girlfriend at the time. And then within a week, I went back to the movie with her. She came back with me the second time. I ended up marrying that gal. But like I took her to the movie twice and she came with me twice. But yeah, it was kind of like it brought me back to being a kid and wanting to be a cowboy. Like that movie was old school Western type of deal. But to go back to what I'm talking about, like, and then I got to think about how many movies are like that. Like you have the big wheel cattle rancher. Like you think of Westerns as good guys versus bad guys, but a lot of them are actually about the big deal cattle rancher, kind of exerting their will down on this little
Yeah,
guy. And you know, we're talking about that now.
absolutely. Yeah.
And so like that one, and then I was like Young Guns and the whole Lincoln County War. That's kind of a similar thing where the outsider got murdered, and then his you know, Billy the Kid was sticking up for the rancher that got murdered. El Dorado. Are you familiar with El Dorado? It's like a small ranch getting the
Not
guy
familiar with
wants
it.
the big rancher wants the little guy's ranch, so he's got hired guns out to get him. It's a John Wayne one, but there's a bunch of them. Man who shot Liberty Valance. Have you seen
Yeah.
that? That's in your neighborhood.
I, I have seen it. Yes.
That's the one where John Wayne. There's really only one movie I think where John Wayne calls anybody Pilgrim, and it's that one. But that's your. Are you familiar with the picket wire?
Picket
Purgatoire?
Wire Canyon,
Yeah,
Purgatory. Yeah, that's in
Purgatory.
my home. That's in my homeland.
Yeah,
I
so I
have a
was looking
poem.
that up because I was like, what
Yeah.
is that? I've looked that up because like what is that real story? And it's not really exactly like the movie, but it's the same thing. Like the big cattle organization, like at the end there's the big cattlemen's organization and they're trying to push all the little guys out by not becoming a state. That's the whole thing of that movie. But there, I mean, it just goes into it. And then I got to think about the Johnson County War, which
Yep.
don't you
I'm
have
looking at
some,
that right.
what's that?
Yeah, in Wyoming, the Johnson County War in Wyoming.
Right. And I got this, and I was thinking about that because that is exactly, and that goes back to what we talked about before on the JA Ranch. We were talking about Charlie Goodnight and how the Adaires, I think they were Scottish, but they were like aristocrats. All these people from, it became like a trendy thing for European aristocrats that were
Yeah.
worth tons of money to come to US and invest in the cattle business. This was like 1880s, maybe late 1870s.
Yeah.
And so it was a big deal for them like to come and the Adaires partnered with Charlie Goodnight and I talked about how they wouldn't sit at the same table as one of the working ranch hands because they were these aristocrats and you don't sit with the help. But they also were like these lords and nobles from England and Ireland who were used to kind of exerting their will over the peasants, you know, that, you know, and this was generational. They had been taught that they were better than working class people and that, you know, they could just kind of do whatever they wanted.
Right.
And that's what led to the Johnson County War, which is Johnson County, Wyoming. And if you look at Wyoming, there were these aristocrat type of people, and they built the Cheyenne Club, right? Was I talking to you about the Cheyenne Club?
Yes.
Yeah. And it was this big, like I don't want to say gentleman's club, but
Yep.
it was
That's
a big
exactly what it
club,
was. Yep.
where they, you know, drank and played cards and smoked cigars and
And made
were
business deals.
yeah. Yeah, but and just became kind of a club of guys, but a lot of them were from Europe and
Wealthy.
just yeah, incredibly wealthy. And so there became this issue that came up, and I wish I'd looked more into the issue before I got on here, but um where they went up to Buffalo, Wyoming, which was crazy the distances when you think about this deal. But there was like 40 of them, 40 people, and they hired a bunch of guys from Texas, like a handful, I guess, of guys from Texas, like hired guns, and there was bounties on certain people in Buffalo, Wyoming that they claimed were rustlers. They were told these guys were rustlers, but what it was they were just kind of exerting their will over a rangeland that they wanted power over. That's how I read it. Um, but and then if you get into it, so I just read this book not that long ago, Cattle Kingdom: Hidden History of the Cowboy West. Pretty good book, but it lays it out pretty well. Well, I had a major problem with it. To go back to last week's, it talks all about Teddy Blue Abbott, and it spends a lot of time in the northern range, which is like Wyoming, Montana, South Dakota, North Dakota. There's a full chapter on the die-up of 1886, which was a blizzard where all the cattle died. Doesn't mention, I don't think Charlie Russell is mentioned one time in this book, which is insane to me because the whole picture of the 1886 die-up
Yeah.
is his picture. And,
Yeah.
and he became a world famous artist from
Yeah.
that blizzard. And
The
he was
what was it?
good friends.
Last of
Yeah.
5,000 or something like
Yeah.
that.
And he was good friends with Teddy Blue Abbott, which they constantly quote in this book, and they never mention Charlie Russell. If I ever talked to this author, I would be like, how could, I don't know, how could you do that? But, um, but to go back to the book, there's a quote in here. It says, so Wyoming Stock Growers Association was kind of like the Cheyenne Club. The Cheyenne Club ran the Wyoming Stock Growers Association. And then there was the Cheyenne Daily Leader was the one newspaper that kind of told the truth and wasn't kind of under the thumb of these guys. And they came out and said, um, in March 23rd, 1892, less than 2 weeks before the invasion, so less than 2 weeks before this war, the editor wrote, "We regret the revival of the old spirit of intolerance in the Wyoming Stock Growers Association, an un-American spirit of dominance which would ride roughshod over the weaker elements and force them to immigrate or crawl, cowed and subdued, at the feet of a fierce and implacable oligarchy." Does that sound familiar?
Oh, yes.
You know what I mean? I mean, it just goes right back to like NCBA, all the big
Yeah.
wheels. This guy who testified today was the president of Kansas Livestock Association. You know,
Yeah.
those are the they were
Well, that makes
yeah,
sense because that's really how they're kind of traditional, right? I've always
yeah,
said that the members of these organizations are there for the tradition of it, not the policy part
right.
of it. And so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. But to go into the
Yeah.
evasion,
Wow.
these guys, these like aristocrat type people got on a train. They went up to, I think, Casper, got off the train. They should make a movie about this because it's the craziest story. And it's almost like a comedy because they get off the train and they had wagons loaded with ammunition and dynamite because they were going to kill these people. And so they stopped at this first ranch house where they wanted to, one of the guys that they wanted to kill was at. And, somebody escaped and ended up telling the people in Buffalo that these guys were doing that, and they ended up spending their 2 day, I think a full day or maybe 2 days, trying to kill this one guy in this ranch house, and he ended up shooting three of them. He eventually, they tried to light it, and then they lit the place on fire, and which is just like the movies. Like if you read this, it's like, okay, we've got this guy down here, he won't come out. They light it on fire, he takes off running. They ended up shooting him and killing him. But I mean, he held off like these 40 people, one guy. And so by that time, everybody in town knows about it. So they go to the next ranch house, and one of the guys, so they brought these newspaper guys with them because they were like bought off
Okay.
and we're going to tell the story of how they killed these rustlers. And one of the guys that said he wasn't used to riding and he had hemorrhoids so bad that they had to pick him up and put him on the horse and take him off the horse because he couldn't mount because his hemorrhoids were flaring up so bad. And then there was another guy they said was obese, and when he was getting on his horse, kicked the scabbard with his rifle in it. Rifle fell off, fell down, hit the ground, went off, hit him in the knee, shot and
Oh my,
shot himself in the knee, and he ended up they eventually cut his leg off. He ended up dying from it. And then so then they go to this other ranch house and they're all holed up in there. And the people from the town come out and surround this ranch house. And there's like Civil War veterans and people from Buffalo who are like they said one guy was from Vicksburg, so they're from the Civil War. They were like gonna siege this ranch house and get these guys out. And turned out the wagons were behind these guys who got to the ranch house. So the people from the town showed up. The wagons hadn't got there. So the wagons get there, and all the people from the town are like, they got all this ammo and dynamite. They were ready for a war, you know. They were coming to kill us all. And so they end up building this thing. They put two wagons together and had like logs in front of them, so bullets couldn't get through. They had like, and they were going to push those. They
yeah,
said there was 14 guys behind it. They were going to push it up close enough to the house, so that, to where they could throw the dynamite into the house. That was the plan. And one guy in the house, so this goes back to the comedy. One guy in the house, he's crawling out on his belly, you know, to like get a place to shoot or something, or trying to get away. I can't remember, but his gun goes off, shoots him in the gut. He dies because he's
oh,
crawling and his gun's
jeez.
in his holster and it flops out and shoots him. So, you know, we got hemorrhoids. One guy shoots himself in the knee, the other guy shoots himself in the gut. And then, but then eventually, like they were just getting ready to take this thing down to the ranch house and the cavalry showed up. So they somehow got, that's the other part. These people, these guys, when they showed up, they cut all the telegraph lines so that the people in Buffalo
Right.
couldn't wire out. Well, then they got in trouble and they couldn't wire out. But they eventually got a hold of somebody in DC, and the people in DC got a hold of the military and sent them out. So there wasn't a big, you know, everybody didn't kill each other. But it's quite the story. But I felt like it just
Was
kind of fit back in with
that was
exerting
it
your
does.
power
It
over.
does. And I'll just tell you, oh yeah, definitely. And that movie that you alluded to was true to fashion. Open Range. That was really kind of goes with that. But
Yeah, I mean, it was
what I was
kind of the same. It
it was the
almost,
exact same thing in the same area.
yeah, and I'm sure that they took a lot of inspiration from it because it was
Oh
like, because at
yeah,
this time, 1892, that was, you know, 1886, all the cattle died. So the ranchers who were able to survive that, there was a serious battle for
which
grass.
were well, I mean, I don't know if there was or not. There was with the serfs, of course, but it put so many of the aristocrats out of business. That's
Yeah,
the blizzard of 1888, which started, in the Canadian border and went clear to Texas. I mean, it
right.
wiped everybody out.
Yeah.
That was
But then
that was
afterwards, there was just a shortage of range. And so there was these kind of flare-ups. And that's what Open Range was based on.
exactly. That guy's name was Nate Champion at the KC
Yeah.
Ranch, is what
Yeah.
you're. Oh,
Right. You
yeah,
just looked that up?
I just looked it up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the one guy
pretty
said if
cool.
he goes, after they killed him, he was like, if I had 50 guys like that, I could whip the whole state of Wyoming.
Well, the thing is those vigilantes came from 23 of them, according to this, came from Paris, Texas, all the way up there to fight
They were
for
like
those guys.
hired guns. And they
Yeah,
said
they're high.
after, so like the cavalry arrested them. Um, and, or they like surrendered to the cavalry and they found like lists. They called it the dead list of people that they were supposed to kill. And they got like $50 extra for every one of them that they killed or something. This is straight out of the movies. But
It
that
says
deal in open
they
range.
quickly took. Say
Go
that
ahead.
again.
I was gonna say, does it ever bug you like in movies? The only bad thing about open range is when he shoots about 20 shots out of his two six shooters.
My
Does
favorite.
that kind of stuff bug you?
Well, no, but my favorite part of Open Range was, and it kind of alludes to what we're talking about, was when he goes into that store and they're fixing to be in that fight and he buys that fancy chocolate and
Oh yeah.
the store owner goes, "We can't afford, me and my wife can't afford to eat our own chocolate." And he goes, "What in the hell is wrong with you?" So he gives him part of his chocolate to eat. And I'm like, you know what? That's really they imported all that chocolate, but they couldn't even afford to eat their own chocolate that they sold. It was pretty funny. That's a good
Yeah.
show, though. I
It
liked it.
was a great movie. I love that movie. Yeah, but to go back, yeah, little things like that. I try not to think about them, but yeah, when he's unloading them six shooters and he fires off about 30 rounds out of them, it's kind of like,
Yeah,
maybe take a break and reload.
yeah.
But yeah, it was pretty cool. It was really neat in the theater.
It's
Um,
kind of the Wyoming Stock Growers Group then headed north on Sunday toward Buffalo to continue its show of force. By early morning of the 11th, however, news quickly came of the large hostile force heading towards them. They quickly rode and took refuge in the TA Ranch in Crazy Woman Creek. We've actually run cattle on the Crazy Woman Creek.
yeah. Then they said that eventually there was like 400 people surrounding that ranch house from both Sheridan and Buffalo, which you go back to those days, like Sheridan and Buffalo, I think it's about an hour drive apart. So what is that? 3 or 4 days ride? I mean, depending, I guess you probably do it quicker if you're going to rescue your
I don't
buddies or
know.
something. But
I don't know.
the other thing that was cool about open range, and I think it goes into, everything like Jesse James, all of these kind of guys. They grew up in such a violent time with the Civil War to where lives were worth, very little. I mean, everyone was dying all the time. And so then they ship them out there, so then after the Civil War, everybody goes out to an area which has no laws, and then they're all just
Yeah,
kind of, that's what led to the Wild
yeah,
West, really. Just,
it really is. That's why they call it the Wild West. And I didn't realize, I guess I should have known that the hole in the wall, the hole in the wall was made famous by the Johnson County War. I did not know that.
how did that factor in?
They said that many of the wrestlers would hide out at the hole in the wall.
Hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, that goes back to you didn't really know who was wrestlers or not. But if you're bringing
Yeah.
Dynamite and a whole list of,
Well,
and
the
the thing about this
oligarch was,
champion, he had witnessed two people get murdered.
yeah.
So they wanted
Um,
for him for sure to be killed because he'd already seen two people get murdered.
and wasn't one of them was Cattle Kate? Wasn't she a part of that? Remember Cattle Kate?
Yeah, I remember the picture. I can't remember. See, I
Yeah,
wish I
she
would have
was.
went back to see how this whole thing
Her name
started
was
better.
Ella Watson, better known as Cattle Kate. She was a local rancher, but she was accused by them of stealing cattle. They were lynched. Her and her husband, Jim Averill, uh, were both lynched. The
Yeah.
gruesome act was one of the rare cases in the Old West. Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
So here it says the residents of Buffalo failed to grasp the real motives of the leading cattlemen in the territory who, in the wake of the big die-up, which was that blizzard, had allowed their financial distress to escalate into desperation and paranoia. And then it said homesteaders at the time, for a token fee of $10, claimed another 160-acre parcel of the best grassland, or potentially as much as 640 acres at 25 cents an acre under the Desert Land Act. Open range shrank, and as noted earlier, the cattlemen lost access to the creeks and streams they needed for watering their herds. So that was what kind of
That's
kicked
right.
the whole deal off.
That's right. And that's not an unusual circumstance. I know. So as late as let's see, 1919 on Antelope Mesa, where I was born and raised, my old neighbor, who I used to uh, go talk to all the time. I mean, he just died about 10 or 12 years ago. His name was Bud Walker. We actually own his ranch now, but he was born and raised there. And before there was fences. I mean, the country was homesteaded, but nobody had fences up. So all these homesteaders were trying to share the same water sources. And of course, there was a lot of fights. A lot of bad feelings between um, between the ranchers and the neighbors out there. And he was actually walking into the Antelope Mesa schoolhouse, which sits on my mom's ranch, and he heard a gunshot to the south. And two of the neighbors, one had herded his sheep over in the dark of the morning to water out of this guy's well. He had a well there, and it's still there to this day. And the other guy shot him but he shot him in the leg. Well, all the kids heard it. They were walking into the schoolhouse, and he said, I turned around and I seen him down there about a quarter of a mile, and there was a big hustle. And they brought him up um, to the schoolhouse. Somebody sent word to town, probably in a Model T or something, to go get the doctor. And before they could get the doctor, he bled to death out of his leg. That is a big piece of Crowley County history right there.
Hmm. That's like Little Britches, which is your neighborhood. Have you still haven't read Little Britches? You said your
I
mom.
haven't read Riches.
You got that's your neighborhood, and a lot of it deals with a lot of water issues and how there was yeah, I can't remember it exactly, but it
You
was a
know what I
big deal.
told you? My dad always said, water's worth more than gold and oil.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, we should just do these and talk about history the whole time and feel better about it.
It's a lot funner, isn't it?
But that is cool to I was thinking about that and then I read that quote from there about I mean, you can correlate it back to today where it's like the big wheels want to
Absolutely.
constantly have power over the little guy. So that now instead of invading, they're going to DC and saying, "I'm the voice of the cattlemen,"
Yep.
when what they
Yeah.
really want to do. And he
And
talked about
actually,
too,
you
he's
should
like
write.
he was talking about small packing plants and how he wants to reduce regulation in them. But I mean, to me, like that's a straight up lie. You're lobbying against the Prime
Yeah,
Act. You don't
you're
want to
lobbying
reduce.
against that.
Yeah, it's full
Well,
of
that's
crap.
why it's so important to point out how fork-tongued they are, because they say one thing and do another. It's not true. We know that.
All right, man.
Anyway,
Congratulations
are
to
you happy?
the Riverside FFA. What did she call it? My daughter, Sage Mundorf. Um, God dang, she's an idiot. What did I call it? Meeting, something about meetings. I'll think of it. Conduct of meetings. That's what it is. Conduct of meetings.
Yeah, conduct of me.
They're on
Yep,
to state,
that's right.
qualified
FFA
for
con.
state. So she was real excited. All right, man.
That's pretty awesome.
Adios.
Okay, buddy.
Lonesomelands.com. Go to
You have a good
subscribe.
week.
Click subscribe. Help us keep doing what we're doing. Click on subscribe. You want advertising opportunities? Email Jim at Lonesome Lands. Mundorf Heritage Beef if you want to buy beef straight from my family's farm. Adios.
I loved every minute of it.